This is part 3 of a 3-part podcast with Andre Feldman.
Hi, welcome to the Pnoe podcast series. I'm Daniel Crumbach, the head of science and education at Pnoe. I'm a clinical exercise physiologist, sport physiotherapist, high performance specialist, and strength conditioning coach with over 25 years of experience in performance and health optimization. I specialize in physiological testing, analysis, and exercise program design, working with a large spectrum of the population, from the general public seeking to improve their health and function, to amateur and professional and Olympic athletes who want to improve their performance. Throughout my career, I've worked with amateur to elite triathletes and endurance athletes, bodybuilders, military and other tactical professionals, as well as many national and Olympic teams in China. At Pnoe, our mission is to bridge the gap between science and Euro fitness. Through Pnoe, the world's first clinical-grade cardiometabolic analyzer for the mass market, we gave everyday consumers access to the biometric monitoring and guidance once only available to Olympians. Our clients range from wellness and weight loss coaches to world-renowned triathletes, leading academic institutions, and healthcare systems. What they all share in common is the dedication to the belief that science-based decisions hold the key to any fitness and health goal. Throughout our journey that started from research in nanosensing technologies and evolved to helping people improve their performance and health, we saw that science and fitness have drifted apart. We launched this podcast to change that. Here, we bring cutting-edge insights from athletes, coaches, scientists, and industry leaders who share their knowledge and experience of how science-based decisions lead to success.
People like to think, one system at a time. And of course, as you just stated, every system is interactive when it comes to either delivery or utilization of oxygen. One example, of course, is hyperventilation. And hyperventilation, or essentially taking too many breaths per minute, doesn't have to be linked with any kind of dysfunction. It could just be, a discoordination problem, as you said, specifically at running at different intensities. And let's say in zone 2, you're finding that your person is breathing a low volume, but choosing to breathe at 40 breaths a minute. The effects on all the other systems will be profound.
Yeah, you can definitely, if you start over breathing, you're also going to have we've talked about this a lot. You kind of get this Bohr effect. You can get hemoglobin dissociation curves effect. So if you start playing around with the gas exchanges, you can definitely, to a certain extent, have some problems. I mean, this is somewhat regulated by your physiological system, so you can't get super out of whack because your body's just going to pull you back in. But I do think that there's enough give there that you can optimize things.
Absolutely. I think, by making small adjustments to volume and breathing frequencies, you can affect the dilation or constriction of your blood vessels. And that can have an effect. If you become hypocapnic, it makes, like you said, O2 a hard time offloading at the muscle, but you can also have effects on cognition and your ability to make quick decisions. And in certain sports, if you're a mountain biker, the ability to decide quickly and correctly could be the difference between a season-ending injury and being able to perform well.
Maybe I have I've got a question for you, or I want to get your input on this. So what I always try to talk when I talk to people about respiratory training is the advantage of acknowledging your respiratory system is something you have control of, and training it so that you have the capacity to alter volume and cadence or respiration rate really gives you this like new arsenal that in your training or in your racing you can play with this. You can play around with this. And there was a couple of years back, I read some article on Froome, and I've never been able to confirm it. But it was a doctor talking about that Froome during his time trials was like breath holding and then over breathing in certain situations. And they had this film where they showed and trying to get this manipulation through the cognitive control of your respiratory system. What do you think about that? Do you play around with that with your athletes?
I do. My guys that are you got to have your really smart, savvy guys who probably have done respiratory training before. They've seen a profound effect. You can say, well, now use it as a strategy. You can use it two ways as a strategy. One, if you know, for example, that you've got a large steep hill climb, and that you're going to be producing a large amount of metabolites and CO2, start breathing quickly before you start up the hill, and lower your CO2 levels before you even start. And that will get you further up the hill before you start to saturate. And then the other way I use it or even when you now have topped the hill, there's a tendency to slow your breathing down and going deep, where I would just keep them with more rapid breathing to blow off the carbon dioxide and then go deep afterwards to reload. And people use these strategies, they would notice a huge difference in their performance, but also they watch their heart rates just dropping at a massive rate in response to their choice of how deeply or how quickly they breathe. And the other one I use is listen to the other riders. If you want to know exactly when to take them, listen to their breathing frequencies, listen to their volumes, and you can decide when you're going to leave them behind.
Yeah, it's like an awareness thing. Yeah, that I mean about the other riders. That's definitely good input. I find that very interesting, because now it's not just awareness of your breathing and the control you have over, right? Like this empowerment thing, like you control your breathing, but that only works if you put the time in, right?
Right.
You got to learn how to do that. It's just like you can't just decide riding up the hill, I'm going to ride with 90 cadence if you're only ever riding 70. Because once you go to 90, you're just not going to be able to do it, right? You got to play with these cadences, and same with your respiratory system. So you have to get that capacity, and then listening to other riders. That's really interesting.
Well, let's say we've identified a respiratory limitation, which we have on multiple athletes. Let's talk a little bit about respiratory training and the options that are available. Like I said, most people think it's resistive and it's inspiratory because that's what's out there. But let's widen it open for our audience of the different types of training that you can apply and when you'd apply them.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be definitely much more of a discussion. I'd like to just throw this back and forth because you have a lot of experience with this as well. We can kind of maybe exchange some ideas. I like to take it when I do my respiratory training, and I do like to take this kind of strength and conditioning approach to it, which is a little bit different than what Spyro Tiger, for example, did classically, where they really promoted this long, slow duration type training for respiratory training as well. And so there's different reasons why I prefer kind of interval based. And one of them is just that people find it really boring. And so interval based makes it a little bit more exciting. If you assume 100% compliance from your athletes, I think it's still correct to have some longer sessions in there for sure. Maybe on a side note, cool with the P100, the goal is that you could then use it during exercise as well, because the CO2 is measured, right? So it kind of
that's actually one of the things we're trying to get across to people is that if you own a metabolic analysis device like the Pnoe, wear it to train. If you have a respiratory limitation, just bring up your breathing frequencies and your tidal volumes live.
Yeah.
And dedicate one training session a week to respiratory, where you work on controlling your breathing frequencies and volumes at different intensities. And it's an excellent method of the application from doing respiratory training with a device versus actually sitting on your bike or being on a treadmill, for example, and being able to view your actual numbers live will allow you to make the adjustments and make sure the transference happens. Although, to tell you the truth, I didn't have a lot of trouble getting people to transfer their Spyro Tiger training over to their actual race, to the races and their performance.
Yeah, but I think that I'm going to go ahead and say this. I would argue the reason for that is because you did your screening on who needs it, right? The transferability question, I think, becomes a bigger problem if a lot of people that are non-responders are then also getting argued with, you can't it's not transferring, but maybe it would never transfer, right?
Right.
So, but if you do the screening, you may still have a transfer problem, but it's less of a problem because you're actually hitting something that people need.
That's a very good point. Yeah, so identify the population that truly requires it, and it will work every time.
Yeah, which is what you're doing, right? Oops, sorry. Which is what you're doing. Maybe to quickly go back to kind of wheel myself back to the respiratory training questions to talk about look, we talk. I think when I start with people with respiratory training, I actually think the coordination side of it is the side that I start with, and I get people to run through different intensities, volumes, frequencies. Because I think it gets people customized. It opens up their ability to do different, that range that we're talking about, to realize what the respiratory system is and how it can be used and how it can be manipulated and what that feels like. And they will get improvement out of it as well, because they hadn't really done respiratory training before anyways. And after that kind of initial phase, then I try to focus a little bit more on, what do I need to do now? Do I need to do more intensity? Do I need to do more kind of volume based? Do I need to do more, title? When I mean volume, I mean like total amount of training, intensity, high intensity of the training, but then also either or of those. Do I need to work on a tidal volume, or do I need to work on respiration rate, and how am I interchanging with those two? And that way of thinking, I think, is much more reflected in strength and conditioning than in classical endurance training, in my opinion.
I agree. And, that's my feeling is if you use spirometry to identify a capacity issue, so related to their FVC or their FEV1, then you're going to have to work on volume if their FVC is low. So unfortunately, most of the devices are resistive. They already have a hard time breathing the volume that they should be able to breathe. By adding resistance, you're just going to get them more efficient at breathing a low volume. So applying resistance and supposedly gaining strength may also even lead to stiffening of the diaphragm. So there's some real problems with, if there's capacity for volume for the FVC, I'll work on volume without resistance. And some of it's neuromuscular, and some of it, for example, if there's a thoracic or rib mobility issue, get in and do the right exercises to be able to expand the chest wall itself, to be able to get as much air in as possible. It needs to happen. Then if they have an FEV1 problem, it tends to be more expiratory power and coordination. So doing resistive FEV1, like expiratory training, works really quite well, but most of the devices don't do expiration. If you get rid of the capacity issues, then I work on capability issues. So how do they apply it? So one of the methods I do is to be able to look at their, let's say their tidal volume at any point during their exercise test. Do they achieve volumes that are appropriate for their vital capacity? If they do, they've proven they can access the volume, but they may choose not to because of a neuromuscular or coordination issue. So it isolates itself as being neuromuscular and coordination by saying, well, how come you can breathe 4 liters at 50 breaths a minute, but at 20 breaths a minute, you're breathing 2? So that's just a coordination and neuromuscular issue that you can use respiratory training to improve their capabilities so that they can actually move, they can deliver more oxygen to the muscle itself. So I tend to divide things into a volume, strength, coordination, and endurance. Of course, if you see a decrease in volumes over time on a long enough test, not like a 9 to 12 minute ramp test, but if you're doing an endurance test like the 515 and you're up to 50 minutes and all of a sudden you're seeing a decrease in volume because the fact that the respiratory muscle fatigue, then you've got to do the longer workouts to get them so their endurance of their respiratory muscles are improved.
Yeah, and getting that data is really important there. Maybe I have a question for you, because you gave that interesting example of, at lower intensities, someone's only breathing 2 liters, and higher intensities 4 liters. And the argument is, well, like, you can breathe 4 liters. Why are you only breathing 2 here? And I think you could then extrapolate, say, well, there's no reason to do the 4 liter breathing, right? But what I would say to that is, well, it's not about do you have to do it. It's about, are you able to? Which we get back into this toolbox. Like, are you able to say, no, I want to breathe at half the respiration rate, but double my tidal volume? Because I know I can breathe 4 liters up here. Can I do it down here? And the consequence of that would be lowering your respiration rate. And am I able to play around with those? So I think that's that's the argument to be made, or at least an argument to be made.
I agree. Every tool in the toolbox is helpful, but it's really important that those people that are doing respiratory training understand it's not inspiratory muscle training. That's not the end of it. You have choices on volume. You have choices on coordination, strength, and endurance. Guess what? They're all strength and conditioning concepts. Yeah, and and mobility, we can't throw that out there. If you're one of the best workouts in the world is being able to do a Spire Tiger workout that's extremely good for the abdominals and for thoracic mobility. But you combine it with a few mobility exercises, you can find that you can get more volume in, and that you can use as you will. Yeah,
for sure. I actually have another question for you. I'm turning into the interviewer, but this is interesting. So I thought I might throw in some. So I like this distinction, capacity, and capability that you talked about, and I think it's interesting because I think there's a pitfall that new trainers using the Spire Tiger, for example, run into, in that they want to do the capability right away. So this idea that I'm going to do my ventilation testing, and I'm going to realize, oh, Mo, you need to breathe. We need to do your training, and we need to make sure tidal volume is higher for this training because we see that it's too low. And if you just give them some capacity training and retest them 3 weeks later, your ventilation data is all different, because all of a sudden the rib cage has some mobility. So you just did all this planning for capability when you introduce this brand new training and you have no effect. The stimulation that it's going to have in the first 4 weeks could be really big. So, calm down on the specific improvement. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. That's exactly, I tell people you got to work on capacity before capability. Otherwise, you're a bit of a jerk. You're asking them to do something they can't do. So build the capacity and then go after the capability, and realize the capability limitation will change. It should. If you give them a proper training program, it should change. And then it's a matter of maintenance. And of course, using these devices pre-race, post-race, to prepare the respiratory system for racing. And then you could use it post-test to help blow off carbon dioxide and decrease the recovery time. There's a myriad of ways of using respiratory training devices to actually improve more than just their function and performance.
Yeah.
So I would like to talk about one more thing, and that's how we can use testing equipment. Traditionally, how we think of it's not testing equipment, it's equipment, but we tend to think of it as being testing equipment during training to confirm test results and training goals. And this is something that you've done very well, and I'd like you to share that with the audience.
So the main thing this is about is that, in my opinion, I see diagnostics moving into more like big data tracking type thing, where because of technology like Pnoe, like the Moxie, you can track all this data on a very regular basis, is what we were talking about before. And so you kind of close these test by test iterations, you kind of close them down, and you can kind of reassess your situation on a daily, weekly, or even within an hour situation. Constantly you can readjust. So if you're riding with with Pnoe or with Moxie, and you're saying, well, my test results gave me this and this heart rate zone, and I should be in this and this power at this and this power level, you can track your physiology in your training. And if you realize that, well, it's not really at my 200 watts, my heart rate's a little bit higher, my muscle oxygenation seems to be kind of dropping casually a little bit, my ventilation is different from normal, well, then you should probably use this information to now adjust your training. And you should register that adjustment for next day's training and see what it means for next day's training, because maybe it's again different. And then maybe you realized, the training the day before, maybe I was too tired, maybe I shouldn't even have done any training. So you use this information to constantly track, right? And what I say is, if you're tracking information and you're saving data and you never ever look at it or use it, you might as well not track it. Unless you're a scientist and you just love data, but you're not doing anything with it. So make sure if you're collecting data, you've got something to plan. So talk to someone, like if you have a Pnoe, talk to you and try to get some information with what am I doing on a daily or weekly basis with this data, and how is it going to make my training better? Because there's a lot of information there to help you optimize, which is really the thing. It's just optimizing training.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. And just every training session is an opportunity to assess. Mm-hmm. And I guess this is the reason why we started a long time ago looking at wellness and recovery as well. And I think that's a whole different. I'll be asking another guest on specifically to talk about from Omega Wave to discuss wellness measures and recovery. But there's if you're not looking at your results or questioning your results of your training session each day, then you're missing important information and you're not maximizing your training.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then the let's just say the more ambitious you are, the more you should track it. And if you just don't care, well, then you don't need to track it. But then you also don't need to spend the money on the equipment. So.
Well, this has been fabulous, Andre. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And this is obviously we've broken this into a two-part podcast because we've covered so much information. I'd be very happy to have you back again to discuss other topics.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Daniel, thank you very much. I like talking to you over the years. We've exchanged a lot of information. I hope you've learned as much from me as I've learned from you. I always think it's good when these things go both ways and they're dialogues instead of monologues. So that's why I enjoy talking to you.
Well, absolutely. It's been absolutely my pleasure working with you. And of course, your dad, who started a lot of us off on this path with his constant analysis and his unwillingness to accept things for what they are. We all love him for all the work that he's done through the years. And I really respect the work you're doing with Roger and the guys from Moxie. I can't recommend the Moxie near-infrared spectrometry device more. It's a great combination with VO2. And if we're looking for a response to respiratory limitations, then I'm very excited to get to work on the Spirotector P100.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give a quick shout out to my dad too, because I definitely wouldn't be here if, for multiple reasons, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And it always blows my mind the reach that he has. I always meet new people who are like, "Oh, you're his dad." And I'm like, how do you even know? And a lot of people seem to catch on. And anyone who doesn't know my dad, Jörg Feldman, I would recommend, if you have the time and patience, to go to the Moxie forum and look at. He hasn't posted for a while, but the earlier posts that he did, they're really good. If you can get through the funky English, there's a lot of good information there, a lot of insight for people to look at about NIRS, but VO2 and performance in general. So it's always fun. I always go back and read some of those, and a lot of times I realize how things that I all of a sudden think, I'm like, oh yeah, my dad said that 10 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, I love his Swinglish. It's fun to listen to, that's for sure. And yeah, he's a true leader in our profession, that's for sure. Well, thanks again, Andre. It's great talking to you, and I look forward to our next opportunity for us to chat.
All right.